I'd like to call the regular meeting of Arnprior Town Council for Monday, May 24th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. to order. Have a roll call, please.
Councillor McGee? Here. Councillor Toner?
Here.
Councillor Burnett?
Here.
Councillor Grinstead? Here. Councillor Strike?
Here.
County Councillor Lynch?
Here.
And Mayor Stack.
Here. Just before we start this evening, maybe we can ask John to come forward and just give us a bit of a verbal update after our exciting weekend with the storm here in Arnprior. We certainly fared out much better than some of our neighbors, but just so that the public has an idea where we're at, Joe.
Yeah. Evening. Yeah, so it was quite a weekend for sure. I mean, certainly we fared much better than some of our neighbors, particularly the city of Ottawa, Carleton Place, Greater Madawaska, among others. So we didn't come out of it completely unscathed. We did have a number of trees that we had to clean up on some municipal roads in town. Certainly within our parks, Graham and his crew have been assessing and cordoning off trees in our parks and trails. A number of those trees will still take us several days to clean up, some of which will require professional arborists. Some of them are just beyond the capabilities of our staff as well. So we did experience the sewage bypass during the actual rain event. It was a pretty intense rain for a relatively short period of time. So we did have a sewage bypass, as we sometimes do during very intense rainfalls. So that resulted in a beach closure for the past couple of days, 48 hours from the event. So we're beyond that now, which is good. Thankfully, it wasn't too warm of a weekend, so there wasn't too much of an interest in swimming at the beach, but that is now passed as well. So yeah, so I mean, certainly a big thank you to our crews and our staff who came in this weekend to respond to these events. We've also reached out to our neighbors at Greater Madawaska who have declared a state of emergency. We've offered our assistance, and we're just kind of waiting for them to take us up on the offer if they need manpower or equipment or whatnot. So probably had some communications with the CAO there today as well. But generally speaking, that's the extent of it. Our power outage was limited to a few hours on Saturday, which is great. Can't speak the same for my personal house, which is outside of town, still out of power since Saturday, so that's unfortunate. But yeah, so generally speaking, I think we fared okay. We seem to have dodged the last couple major windstorms and the tornado a few years ago. I think Kinburn as well. So you know, we're lucky in a sense, I guess.
Thanks, John. I did speak with Mayor Hunt today too, and offered the same support to Greater Madawaska. But then I spoke with the chief and the deputy chief yourself, not over the weekend, Graham, and certainly, council's appreciation to all of the crews that were out helping us. I think Corey told me they had at least 3 or maybe 4 elevator rescues over the weekend, and there was a wire down by the hospital they had to deal with, as well as the tree issues and everything else. So we certainly appreciate the staff's effort and the hours they put in over the weekend. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
You know anybody losing Carleton Place? Because they're having a hard time. Before we begin tonight, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we work and gather is the traditional and ceded territory of the Anishinaabe Bay people. This Algonquin nation have lived in this land for thousands of years, long before the arrival of the European settlers, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. We have an adoption of the agenda, which is amended.
The council adopt the amended agenda dated May 24th, 2022.
Move and seconder, please. Tom and Lisa, any comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. You have any disclosure of pecuniary interests? Yeah.
I have a conflict with one of our closed session items, so I will vacate at that time.
Okay, thank you. Lisa?
I have to declare on, it's just a delegation at this point in time. I don't meet the Greater Arnprior Seniors Council presentation due to proximity of my home to the project.
I'm sorry, but I'm not hearing you. Is it 8A, you said?
8A,
8A.
the Greater Arnprior Seniors Council presentation due to proximity of my home.
Okay, good. Okay, do you have any questions on previous council business? Seeing
Do
none.
not have any hands raised.
Thanks, Kate. I keep forgetting we're in a hybrid situation here. With so many people in the room, you think you're back at the regular session. So we have the adoption of the minutes, please.
The council adopt the minutes of the regular and special meeting of council under items 7A and B of the agenda.
Mover and seconder, please. Chris and Lynn, comments? All in favor? Carried, thank you. So we have two presentations, and the first one, Jennifer, is going to introduce our guest.
Serena, come on. I'll introduce Serena Deschamps. She is our senior manager at KPMG. Serena has been our lead auditor on our Arnprior file now for the last 4 years. We are year 4 of a 5-year RFP, which we began with Allen Partners, and then recently last year, we're now part of KPMG. So with that, I'll turn it over to Serena. She's going to walk you through the audit finding report for the fiscal year ended December 31, 2020.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. So changes at our firm. We did join with KPMG in last October. So it's been 7 months of big change for us. But what we're finding actually quite interesting is though their audit methodology is different than Allen & Partners was, we're finding quite interesting actually is we circle back around to the same large main issues that we were looking at when we were at Allen & Partners. So big change, but really not so big. Same staff on your file this year. I'm still around. So if you have any questions on that, I'm happy to answer, but KPMG is honoring the proposals that Allen & Partners signed into when we joined with them. So always good there.
Another sign of the business world.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought tonight what I'll do is I'll just touch on some high points in the audit findings report. It does contain some of the financial information. And then if you have any questions on the financial statements, you can feel free to ask me. So on this first page here are audit highlights. I was just going to touch on, let me flip through here. So right at the top, right there, control deficiencies. We just wanted to highlight that we did not identify any control deficiencies that we determined to be significant in internal controls. So that's a good note. And we did not have any differences that we found throughout the audit that went uncorrected. So I feel like maybe there was 2, but yeah, no uncorrected entries. So that's great on the highlights. Next page. So financial statement highlights. So this is our statement of financial position. So our balance sheet, which gives us a snapshot of where we're at right at December 31st. And what we can see on this page, which is great to see kind of in the middle there, you see the net financial assets of 1.17 million, which has changed or increased from the prior year of a net debt position of 3.9 million. So fantastic result to see for the town to move out of a net debt position into a net financial asset position. The large changes that we do see on the balance sheet is a big increase in cash. We can see it went from 12 million to about $20 million. But if you notice just down below, we have this deferred revenue obligatory reserve funds. So that's gone up from $2 million to $6 million. And what that is our increase in our building permits and development charges that we collected because of growth, which I think everybody's aware of. So really our cash has gone up, but that's because we collected these development charges that we're now waiting to spend on the identified projects in the development charge study. That makes sense. Any questions on that page? So next page. So this is just a really pretty graph actually of all our net book value of our tangible capital assets. So really what it shows is of our $100 million of net book value of assets, most of it is in our buildings and then our linear assets, which would be our roads and our water and sewer networks.
My only comment there was those pie charts would be nice if there was a percentage attached.
I know, and you know,
Yeah.
I thought that too. I'm going to be honest with you and say this is the first year I actually drafted these, right? Because we're new to KPMG, and I thought the same thing. If I put the percentages next year, and I was thinking actually I'll split out the linear assets.
Yeah, because the smaller sections are, you know, the obvious statement is there, But it's nice to kind of look at a comparison.
Agreed. Next page is our reserves. So our total reserves, which are growing, which is good because we want to be saving to be able to maintain and replace our capital assets that we have. Again, net book value of $100 million, which does not reflect actually the true replacement costs of the assets that the town has. So key changes in our reserves, $120,000 increase to working capital, 720 to capital reserve, and 350 to your winter control. And then our statement of operations, which is our activity in the year, our revenues collected and our expenses. And what we see is we budgeted for a PSAB surplus of 3.2 million, and we actually came in at 5.7 million. So the main difference is there, again, you can see in the revenue lines, the licenses and permits. We budgeted $190,000, but actually earned $853,000, and that would be our building permits that the town gets to keep. And so then we had lower expenses than we had budgeted, mostly in the transportation and environmental lines. We had some changes relating to minor capital, so budgeted for minor capital that did not happen in the year. And as well, recreation was down just a little bit, but we've seen some significant fluctuation in that line over the years because of COVID, right? So it's coming back up to normal, I would say. Any questions on that statement? So another pie chart, we'll just skip past that one. And so here are our 5-year reviews. You'll recall that we had these at the front of your financial statements usually every year. So I'll touch on a couple on each page. On this one, we just wanted to note that the tax arrears closer to the bottom, 4.78%. That's a very, very good low rate, I'll say, which is well below the provincial indicator of 10%. So over 10%, the province would think you were at risk, but we're well below the provincial indicator at 4.78 and lower than last year. So fantastic there. We go to the next page. Again, we see this at the bottom, you see the percentage of operating revenue. So percentage of operating revenue. So the province believes we're in a good position if we're greater than a negative 20%. So at 5%, which is a significant change from last year at a -19. Again, a reflection of the good year that the town had. We're in a really good position and moving in the right direction, I would say. If we go to the next page, I just like to highlight that the long-term debt, the net long-term debt and repayments are well within the repayment limit that's calculated by the ministry. So the annual repayment limit there of 4,187 is your maximum, and we're down at 2.5. So well within our range. And then, oh, sorry, if you go back up, I'm just going to touch on one more number there, the asset consumption ratio. I know I've spoken about this in the past. And what that number is telling us is of the $154 million cost of our assets, we have used up 34% of them. So we've used up $53 million of our $154 million worth of assets. But if you scroll down again to the next page, see the 11.71 capital reserves to accumulated amortization. So the only amount we've saved of that 53 million that we spent is 11% of it. So we've set aside $6 million to replace the $53 million that we've used up. Does that kind of make sense the way I'm saying it? But what I'll say is it has increased from last year. So last year we were at 10.98%. So we're moving in the right direction, which means really we're following our long range plan. We're saving for capital replacement and repairs. Any questions on that? I know I kind of went over that fast.
Just wonder how much of that goes, what's happening to the cost of doing things now.
And I think that's the thing, and an important reason why we, do stress that a long range financial plan is important to have, which the town has, important to follow and important to review regularly because things change. So if we move down, to the next page here, So I just wanted to highlight at the bottom the significant findings that we did not uncover any issues during the performance of the audit that we needed to highlight to town council, any significant findings. So that's all I was really going to touch on. I could talk for hours, but I think you have a full agenda. But any questions on that or the financial statements themselves?
No comments or questions? No, good. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
The next one is Lucas, I guess, in the passport.
So we're here today to talk to the Recreation Passport campaign. That is the first time we've brought this forward in the Recreation Department. Just a little bit of background on this. June is Parks and Recreation Month. It's a movement that promotes benefits of recreation in parks for physical, social, and environmental health. The Recreation Department has recognized this each year, and this is the first year we've grown more into it. This is also made possible by the Participation Community Better Challenge. The town of Arnprior received a grant through the Participation for the amount of $1,100. It's offering barrier-free recreation activities for all to participate in. The third piece of background is the Silver Chain Challenge. This challenge is a friendly competition between a growing number of participating communities from across Eastern Ontario to inspire and promote more active, safer, and healthier communities. Just like the Parks and Recreation Month, as well as Community Better Challenge, it spans all of June. And residents are included, so residents of participating municipalities can register and create an account at the Silver Chain website. They log their kilometers, whether walking, biking, or running, or wheeling on trails and roads around their communities. So the Recreation Passport is a campaign to foster strong mental, social, and physical lifestyle through barrier-free activities. Residents can pick up a free passport, as council has in front of them, from the Nick Smith Center or Town Hall, and collect stamps for every activity attended completed. Passports will also be available at the town tent at Prior Palooza, which will be the first program within that series. Every 4 activities completed is 1 ballot in the draw for list of prizes. And just a note for council, with the passports in front of you, these are printed from our printer at the Nick Smith Center. We have Bertle Printing making the actual physical copies that will look a little more clean and professional than these ones. So there are 16 scheduled activities, 15 scheduled activities, and 1 is an anytime use the lending hub. Some are new activities to town, including flag rugby, water polo, wheelchair basketball, and sledge hockey, which has been here now and then, but not as a program. Other activities are more common, like beach volleyball, swimming, badminton. There's a ranging activities that are supposed to be appealing for all of different able and different interests. Some programs will require registration with capacity limits on the program, and that is all listed on the website. The programs span a number of different recreational facilities across town, including Robert Simpson Park, the Nick Smith Center, Sullivan Rink of Dreams, McLean Ball Diamonds, and the Algonquin Trail. And this program is made possible by a number of partners, including the Ospreys Rugby Football Club, the Ottawa Titans Water Polo, Susan Whitelock Dance Studio, Mountain Road Homestead, the Ottawa Valley Cycling Active Transportation Alliance, the Ottawa Carleton Wheelchair Sports Association, Broomball Ontario, and Sledge Hockey Eastern Ontario, and Bring It On. Prizes awarded for the contest at the end include a half-day pontoon boat rental from White Lake Marina, a half-day John boat rental from White Lake Marina, a full-day unmotorized rental, which is canoe, kayak, stand-up paddleboard from White Lake Marina, 1 hour bowling at Steelheads and Strikes, and $100 gift card to Jill Sports and Promo. Important to note that residents can find full campaign information on arnprior.ca/rec passport, as well as there's a QR code in the passport that takes you directly to that link. Each event can also be found in the events calendar on the town's website. Anyone can register and participate in the campaign programming, but only Arnprior residents will qualify to win a prize. And passports can be returned to the Nick Smith Center or Town Hall by July 10th to be entered into the prize as well.
Okay, comments or questions from anybody? Hey, it's Dan.
So Lucas, wheelie, that doesn't mean four-wheelers and side-by-sides, correct? That's for your wheelchairs?
I will check in on that. I believe you're correct. Yes.
Okay, Lynn?
Great variety of things to do. Some of them, like Dance with Nature or Park Fitness, will there be more of an explanation on the website for people who are trying to figure out if they're able to do it or not?
Yes, every event has a description on the website as well as in the events calendar with more of who the event appeals to more and where it is locations. Just not in the past where we didn't want to overwhelm specific information.
Perfect, thank you.
Chris?
Oh, no, I think it's great. Yeah, I'm good.
I just saw all the hands go up on that side. So anybody here? No? Okay, great job, Lucas. Thanks very much. First time at council?
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't see your hand shaking or anything.
No.
You did a good job. Thanks.
Thank you.
So next we have a delegation from the Greater Arnprior Seniors Council. And Darrell's going to come forward to do that. Just before he starts, I want to just update council. Come ahead and sit down, Darrell. I was invited to a meeting a couple of weeks ago, Darrell, 10 days ago, I forget. Tom Peckett and I with Laurie Van Wyck and Darrell, where he outlined what he's going to tell you about tonight. And it was my suggestion that I thought he should come to council and do a delegation, do a presentation, share all the details with all of us for consideration. Okay. All yours, Darrell.
Thank you very much. Good evening, your worship, members of council, staff, ladies and gentlemen. Pleasure to be here. As you know, we have been working very, very hard to find a new home for both the Seniors Active Living Center and Men's Shed programs. We've been working about 13 months trying to get things organized here. And in fact, we have outgrown both our current Seniors Active Living Center and Men's Shed locations. In addition to that, the future of our Men's Shed program at our existing location is dubious at most. We have looked at several options to effectively house both programs, and we have determined that the Christian Education Center in Arnprior is a good choice moving forward, and it is currently available to us. There are no other properties large enough and available to us unless we build one of our own. We believe that if the Christian Education Center is properly brought up to date and up to code, it would be a perfect community hub to operate the Seniors Active Living Center and Men's Shed programs, including other health services, advancing culture and arts as well, and preserving a historic and natural site in our community. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, it could become a vital purpose charity for the benefit of our community. As a result, we are proposing the development of a non-profit community service cooperative-like consortium to own and operate the Christian Education Center moving forward. Essentially, a joint ownership of the property and a board of directors that would oversee and direct the policies, the expenditures, and the operation of the cooperative moving forward. At this time, we have expressions of interest from first the town of Arnprior, who are interested in pursuing further discussions. Mayor Stack believes and shares our convictions that the CEC is a community landmark, strategically situated and well-equipped to effectively accommodate a host of community programs and services, including youth activities. The second, the Township of McNabb-Grayside. Mayor Peckett is open to further discussions and consultations and sees the Seniors Active Living Center and Men's Shed programs as continuing to grow and prosper in the greater Arnprior region. 3, Grace St. Andrews United Church. The United Church are the owners of the property and have agreed through a letter of intent to being part of the cooperative, as well as a first mortgage holder if required. They are also interested in assisting with the operation of the facility. Arnprior Regional Health have expressed interest at our February 2022 meeting in having further discussions with respect to how the cooperative will be formed, our expectations of them as a potential business partner, and what potential financial and liability expectations are for the CEC procurement and renovation costs. The 5th potential partner is Sullivan and Son Construction. They have expressed real interest in being part of the cooperative and providing the necessary renovations to the Christian Education Center. On Wednesday, April the 6th, I joined members of Sullivan and Son Construction and elders from the Grace St. Andrews United Church on a tour and a preliminary inspection of the CEC. Sullivan and Son Construction have proposed, and I definitely agree, first, that we move forward as soon as possible with the development of a hazardous substance report, which must be provided or completed prior to the construction budgets or even construction starting. This is crucial to determine whether all hazardous containing substances must be removed or if they can be safely contained. A budgetary estimate for this work will be $10,000, which will include a building survey, lab analyses, sampling, and a full report. Second, the engagement of an architect to facilitate the design wants and needs, but also to ensure compliance with building codes and municipal requirements. A budgetary estimate for this work will be $25,000, depending on how far things need to go with the hazardous substance abatement. This expenditure will cover all initial wants and needs, sessions with user groups, CAD drawings for budgetary use, coordination and management of structural, mechanical, and HVAC design, as well as cover the engagement of a structural architect to assess the north wall. This is a logical sequence of events that needs to take place if the procurement of the CEC is to take place. A total expenditure amount of $35,000 will be required to complete both the hazardous substance report and engaging an architect, which, if agreed upon, would be shared by members of the cooperative moving forward. Next steps. 1, that we arrange a meeting with our proposed business partners as soon as possible to discuss the details as outlined in this report. Second, the formation of a non-profit community service cooperative-like consortium to clearly define inputs and responsibilities. Third, the formation of a board of directors to help facilitate the hazardous substance report and the engagement of an architect. Sullivan and Son Construction have agreed to help facilitate the work through their business partners and strategic alliances. We ask, ladies and gentlemen, will the town of Arnprior consider participating in our proposed non-profit community service cooperative-like consortium to own and to operate the Christian Education Center in Arnprior to accommodate the Seniors Active Living Center and Men's Shed programs, as well as other local community programs and services as a community hub initiative, and help preserve the CEC as a historic and natural site in our communities. And as a first and next step, will you agree to share the $35,000 cost with us for the completion of both a hazardous substance report and engaging an architect as soon as possible, please? I want to mention that I have given this presentation to Arnprior Regional Health, Grace St. Andrews United Church, Sullivan and Son Construction, and I present to the townships of McNabb Braeside next week. Thank you very much for this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. May I answer any questions, take any comments? Or you can even throw me out.
Hey, just before I open it up to council, when I went to the meeting, and I agree, the site has historical value and it's central and would be a great site. I understand the need. And we certainly don't want to lose the momentum on SALC or the men's shed. But to me, the bigger, the second part, the board of directors, all of that is going to take some staff investigation and direction for council to understand what they're getting into. But what I do agree is that's the second part. First part is even to find out if this building can be used. And Daryl, in the meeting we had, the ask for our share was, I thought $7,000 was the amount that was sort of split, if that's correct.
Yes, yes, it was.
So, and I suggested then we have a grant policy where it can be applied for, but I felt it was important that it come to council so council understand the direction they're going in and the details on it. And then, if we agree, we would, I think the move would be to make a grant application. But the reality, if when they go in and do the assessment on the building, it can't go any further. We need to know that before we can make any other decisions. So, I'm just summarizing up the dialogue that we had at the meeting. So Lynn and Ted.
So my position on this is an absolute yes. I feel we have a responsibility to our aging population here in Arnprior to keep them active and engaged in the community. And we started this many years ago. We have to follow through and keep it going. So absolutely yes.
Thank you, Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Lynn that 100% for the seniors, but also noted you said youth. And when the youth gets involved with the seniors, it's always a good thing. I only have one negativity, Daryl, is parking. I know when we go for the suppers there, we have a tough time finding a parking spot. Is there some sort of a plan you can share with us, or?
Yes, we, thank you very much, Councillor Lynch. Yes, yes, we have. We've looked at, we can accommodate 41 parking spaces, including the back and along the street. That's what we've calculated ourselves. It's for a big dinner, probably not enough, but we can use the church parking lots and some of the other parking lots that are currently available. And it just takes some negotiations with our partners out there, and we all work together to make it happen.
Thank you.
But I thank you very
The
much.
Catholic Church has a whole parking lot and a
Yes.
church parking lot, and the
Yes.
Anglican Church is not into town.
Yes.
Lynn? Yeah.
Sorry, I have another question that I forgot to ask. So Daryl, if this follows through and everything gets done and you're in there, will you still continue to have the stage, maybe to rent to the local theater company that puts on productions or whatnot, or will that be no longer something that will happen?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we want to bring culture and arts back to our community. We have even checked special grants that we can, even for this opportunity here, we've checked, and there is probably a $350,000 trillium
Nice.
grant to help with the construction and for programs. But culture and arts is so important to our partners here.
Right. And I just think moving forward, once the building is in the position where you're ready to be there and everything, by renting it out to the different theater groups for their productions, will bring in a little bit of income to
It would
help
be,
maintain the building.
yes, it would be a revenue stream
Absolutely.
for sure. And our partners really insist that we have money.
Yeah.
Money coming in to help us for sure.
Perfect.
Chris, yeah,
Thank you. Thanks, Daryl. And I too am in favor of the proposal. I think it's the wave of the future, to be honest, having partnerships. It kind of helps spreads the cost. And I think going forward, that's going to be an important piece of the puzzle for all kinds of organizations. It's a good fit, I find, for our aging community, because they can use the facility during the day, and at 3 o'clock they can head on home, and then the building won't just sit empty and idle. It will be made available for the youth, which I think is very important. And so I'm in favor for sure of helping you get this thing up.
Thank you very much, Councilor Toner. I really appreciate that. I
Hey,
really,
Tom?
really appreciate that.
Yes, Daryl, I think it's a great endeavor, and I'm sure the town will stand behind it. Only I tend to disagree with Chris a little bit. All seniors don't, depart at 3 o'clock. We tend to hang around longer than that. So,
Well,
great
typically,
project.
typically 3 o'clock, don't forget, is nap time.
Siesta.
Oh, is it?
Well, I think.
I haven't reached there yet.
Well, I'm sure you have, Councilor Burnett. Thank you very much for your support.
Ted's next. Yeah.
I can't add, but I'm pleased with everything that I've heard.
Thank you very much, Councilor.
Good.
I really appreciate that.
Okay, so I think then the next step, we'll take this as information tonight. It's presented. I would recommend that you and your team make the application, grant application with the clerk's office. And then they'll bring that back to council. That'll get the presentation and the vote that night on it.
Oh, okay,
Okay,
okay.
good. Thanks, Daryl.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I love these PPE stuff.
Yeah.
Those made that Ben said.
Okay, so we have no public meetings and no matters deferred. Staff reports, and the first one is the library expansion.
The council now proceed with the current tender award for an extension to the Arnprior Public Library building, PW 2022-06, and that council direct staff to form a joint committee between library and town staff to consider alternative options to obtain additional useful space for the Arnprior Public Library, including consideration of an increased Arnprior Public Library building expansion footprint to meet future growth requirements.
Move in seconder, please. Chris and Dan and Patrick.
I'm going to start off. If
Okay,
I may,
Robin.
Mayor, start just a few words as we get started and bring the presentation that Patrick is going to walk us through tonight up. I just wanted to make sure council understood that this was a very difficult report for staff to write. It's not often that we would make a recommendation to council to turn down grant money and to think about a project like this as a second, to take a second look at it, but we really struggled with it. We did a lot of review, and Patrick will walk you through all the financials involved. But just to recall that this library expansion project was not on your capital plan this year. It is a project that the library has been championing for a few years now. We did, and as I said, Patrick will explain the financial components of it. We were very confident that we had a project that we could fund with the assistance of a federal grant to the proposed budget that we had from our contractors. And having it come in at quite a bit higher amount was a bit of shock to us and a struggle for us to get through. So I just wanted to preface the recommendation with those words, and I'll let Patrick run through it, and then I'll jump in again and I'll jump in the recommendation.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council for taking the time to hear from us tonight. So I will go through kind of how we got here, an overview of the project, and to take a deeper dive into the financials. I'll mostly be speaking in rounded numbers tonight, but you do have the exact figures in the staff report. If you have any questions, please show to me and I'll give you the exact number. So in 2018, the Development Charges Background Study indicated that we should be putting money aside for a library expansion. Ideally, we'd be looking at this point, it said ideally we'd be looking at an expansion before 2026. So in early 2019, the Arnprior Library staff began working with architect DCA to establish a design to increase the basement space by 400 square feet, increase the main floor space by another 400 square feet, and reconfigure around 400 square feet of space. So a total of 1,200 square feet of reconfiguration and addition. In 2020, this was refined to just an expansion on the ground floor of 430 square feet with reconfiguration of the staff area into a reading room. And in 2021, the grant application was put in August for just the expansion. So just the ground floor expansion to the structure of 430 square feet. To give council a rough idea of what that feels like, it would be from the wall behind Mayor's stack to double doors behind me and to the exterior wall there. So that's the kind of space we're talking about as an addition to the existing structure. In late December of 2021, we were informed informally that we had been successful in our grant application. So in early January of 2022, operations staff became involved in the design process. With that, there's just minor revisions to make sure we were compliant to AODA standards, everything like that. And we moved forward into our tender process in March, and we got our bids back in April. So the project scope can be broken down into two components. There's the interior addition and the exterior landscaping. The interior addition, as I mentioned, is 430 square feet of space. And it is partitionable, so there's a glass wall that you can pull out between the main structure and this addition. Not something you'd see in a shopping mall, more something you'd see in a conference room or a conference center or like a high-end hotel, that kind of nice glass wall. And this can exit through an accessible pathway to an exterior patio space, so a nice interlocked stone. With an asphalt pathway to get there. And of course, that's at an acceptable grade that you can take wheelchairs, walkers, strollers, everything down there. So on the next slide, you see, it's maybe tough to see on the slides, but I included this as an appendix to your staff report as well. There are 2x4s driven at the corner of where the new addition would go out to, just to give you an idea of physically where it is on the east wall. That's the wall facing the river. Of the library. Next slide, please. Thank you. So you'll notice those top windows are going to disappear. Now those top windows only go into the attic, so it's not that much light gone, but the windows underneath do shrink a little bit, and you are moving the wall forward, so you are losing a little bit of natural light, but there's a lot of light in that facility. And with this, the architecture mirrors that which already exists. So it'll fit well in with the same type of brickwork, same type of siding. And it would maintain the same level. You'd be able to exit you'd exit towards the street to access the pathway down to the landscape area. As you can see on the next slide here, this is the bird's eye view of what you'd be looking at. The addition with Madawaska Street on the bottom. So again, 430 square feet with an asphalt pathway leading to an interlock multi-purpose patio space. There's a lot of plugs there, great for events, very flexible. Provides the public with an accessible space after and before the library opens with free Wi-Fi. It's close to the downtown core, it's close to the riverfront. So the purpose of this project is largely to increase capacity. The library for a little while now, for years, has been experiencing a little bit of a stretch to their capacity, and especially during COVID. So this is kind of an option to go forward in a post-COVID level of service. To provide additional meeting space, right now the library does have rentals for their meeting space of 130 bookings per month on average. That's of course a lot. One thing I do have to note here is the town does have other meeting spaces as well. There's the museum right across the parking lot that does have an accessible meeting space and an accessible ground floor that is rentable. There's the Nick Smith Center with the newly purchased partition, so you can even partition it into two rental spaces depending on what's happening. And then there are private enterprises as well, private venues, but there are other options within the organization. This addition to the existing structure would also provide more options for events. So essentially, the library staff would not have to move as many bookshelves. There's always just a wide open space. So Friday night, somebody wants to come in for an event, they don't have to spend 2 hours setting it up and tearing it down. It's already ready. It's ready all the time. It's a multi-purpose space. The outdoor space, as I mentioned, it's close to the downtown core. It provides Wi-Fi access before and after library working hours, and it's along the riverfront, so it's in an optimal location. That's parkland, of course. We're looking at developing with the waterfront master plan, regardless to an extent. So now comes the bad news. The bids that came in, there were three clustered around just under $1.2 million, with the most competitive coming in at $1,042,800. So looking at the total project costs, we've got our bid. Next slide, please, Caleb. We've got our bid of $1,042,800 plus another $51,000 for architects and engineer. All that just essentially quality control. And we do have to relocate a natural gas service line. Enbridge has given us a price of $4,000 for that. So our total price comes to just over $1.1 million for this project. That's very high for a 430 square foot addition. As a frame of reference, our insurer values the entire facility at $2.9 million. And there's just about 15,000 square feet of space in that facility. This results in an overage of $430,000, which again is very significant. I have not been shy in the past about coming to council when we needed more money for essential activities. Just a few weeks ago, I had to come and say we were $300,000 over on a roofing project, but the roofs were leaking, or we had a failed asset we had to maintain. Before that, I had to come and tell you the trucks were more than they've ever been. And again, we had failed assets we have to replace. With this, it's not quite the same circumstance simply because the asset's not failed. This is a betterment to an existing asset. We're certainly not arguing that an addition is not pertinent. The staff believes that the library does require an addition, though we would like to see a larger addition made so that we at least have some economy of scale. At this dollar figure, when you subtract the landscaping from it, it ends up around $2,500 a square foot, which $2,500 a square foot is extremely high. Usually for even in-depth commercial construction, you're at $800 or $900 a square foot on a very, very high end. Usually you're looking at $300 or $400 a square foot. Comparing this to other projects within the construction market, obviously it's been in the news. The Ottawa Public Library is building the behemoth of a library at LeBreton. That project, which is 70% over budget, it came in at $1,681 a square foot. So that it had a 2-story parking garage under a 200,000 square foot facility. So, but that came at $1,681 a square foot. Again, we're at $2,500 a square foot. Go to the next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So there are some factors to consider here. The federal grant funding is contingent on this project being complete by March 31st, 2023. And if we were to cancel this project, we're certainly not turning our back on this funding. We will work with that account manager to establish a refined scope. They are open to a change in scope that can still benefit the library. So part of the recommendation today would be to establish a committee to look at what we could do with that money and what we can do within that timeline to provide a betterment to the library. and also to provide a full life cycle analysis of what we would see from the library for the rest of its useful life. Our policy with buildings is we want them to last 80 years. If we can improve them, they'll last longer. So this facility was built in 1990. We expect it to go till at least 2070. With the addition being placed where it is, if we do this addition now at 430 square feet, we will have to expand it again within the next 20 years because the town is growing very, very rapidly. And 430 square feet does not go a long way to support this rapidly growing population. If we were doing this at a much smaller dollar figure, this would be less significant. But because we're looking at this, $1.1 million for this, we really have to take into consideration that if we just wait until potentially COVID prices go down, potentially fuel costs go down, potentially the market changes, we could see more affordability in materials and labor, and also a better economy of scale. We are building an entire building, but only purchasing small quantities. So that works against us to an extent. We are micro drilling piles down to bedrock, which is approximately 8 meters down. The soil there is not good to build on. So that's 8 meters straight down, and then you have to have diagonal piles as well. It's very involved, very time consuming, very specialized, very expensive to do foundations this way. So the idea is we really only want to do the foundations once, and we want to go bigger, and we want to make sure that it's a more permanent fixture that will last the rest of the life cycle of the building. The tight timeline also probably did contribute to this project, the cost of this project. The timeline is dictated by the grant funder, so we did have to put that tight timeline to it. With construction, there's a saying, it's always time versus money. If you want something quick, you will certainly pay the premium for it. And we also, I should say, we also have reached out to the provincial government. Mayor Stack has done a lot of legwork in reaching out to our provincial member of parliament to see what other funding would exist. So John and I have been in discussion with staffers from that office. Of course, they can't do anything until after the election, provided they win, of course. And when we're looking at non-capital streams of grant funding, we're generally looking at smaller amounts of money. So it's unlikely that if we are successful in getting non-capital grant funding from any provincial sources open in the coming weeks, months, whatever, it's unlikely to cover a significant amount of the shortfall at this time. Capital streams would likely be where we see that. Capital streams, of course, take months and months of review. I just want to stress one more time, $430,000, that's a lot of money that can be put towards other things. That's a block of civil construction, that's the road rehab for an entire year. There's quite a lot that could go into that. Jennifer tells me it's equivalent to a tax rate increase of 4%, which I'm sure she could speak to in more detail. And simply put, a big part of my role here is asset management. And the best method of prolonging the life cycle of this asset is to expand on it once. And then we essentially want to make a library that can support a full capacity of 25,000 people. Because in general, a library is good for 25,000 people. After that, you move on to, and you actually build a second library. That's typically how urbanization works in terms of that domain. But I'll hand it back to Robin just for our final recommendations.
I just wanted to go through the recommendations for council again, just to highlight again that staff are recommending that we don't proceed to award the tender at this time. And that our recommendation would be that we join that joint committee to have a look at alternative options to increasing space or finding some other alternative within the building or a future expansion footprint to to answer your questions.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. You're a really detailed picture there. I'm sure though you understand this is a different asset than, doing a roof on the town hall in terms of how the community views it. I guess, I did talk both with Cheryl Gallant in her office and John Yakubuski's office. Naturally, I spoke to Laura in John's office just before I came up, and she still is committed to give me a final answer tomorrow morning. So, but the amount, I don't expect it to be any significant if they do come up with something. They think that senior bureaucrats, even though the writ is down, may be able to make some decisions about funding. But anyways, I'll get that call tomorrow, but I'm not holding a real flame to it for sure. There's two things with it. I see it as part of to me, it's combined with the entrance to the waterfront with that walkway. Part that really excited me is what I call the outdoor reading space and Wi-Fi, whatever, but that whole thing is a real benefit, I think, to the community and adds 430 square feet is, I built plants, supervised the building of plants, and the money is there. I'd like to understand how much of that money is in them piles. So is that a significant amount of that total contract? Getting into the ground and doing that seems to me like that's a huge expense.
I don't have a full breakdown just from the bid, but it's a significant amount is in the piles for sure. Significant amount is tied to the timeline, and then obviously they've elevated construction costs.
Yeah, I mean, when you squeeze suppliers, you're going to pay more money, and that's a reality. I'm not so sure the climate will change a lot in a year, but in terms of costs and supply, but that's certainly an issue. We did talk about funding with staff today, and I think there is a source for that issue. So it's really for council to discuss the other issues, and then I'll ask Jennifer to give us an idea where we can find the money and from any particular reserve.
I'm wondering if I could direct questions to Karen, if that would be acceptable.
If you could, which? Sorry.
Direct questions to Karen or Josie, if that would be acceptable.
Sure.
So in the presentation of this report, the discussion is that this is not going to be a big enough addition for future. So that does have a little bit of a weight to it. What are your thoughts on that?
When the board initially started looking at space needs within, and that's when you were on the board as well.
Sorry, Karen, we just stand up so your voice carries a bit more.
I like to put my fall over. If somebody puts me up. When we initially started looking at space needs within the library, and that goes back to when Lynn was there, we understood that there's often a relocation and a reallocation of space. So an example is we used to have a fairly large footprint for our VHS and DVDs. That's now switching over to digital. We already got rid of the VHS footprint, as it were. And then that went over to assist with children's space. Now we're looking at doing more and more things on a digital platform. And the pandemic really brought that to light in the fact that people are now comfortable doing streaming and that sort of thing. So we are going to be losing the collection of our DVDs and our audiobooks on CD within probably 5 years, certainly within 10, they'll be gone. So that'll give us a little bit more footprint within the library to do different reading nooks and things like that. So the pandemic opened up our eyes for looking at a redistribution within the library. The critical part of what we need now for space comes from our strategic plan, which is programming. Carolyn does 5-6 programs every single week. She's in the main hall because there is no other space for her to do that. So consequently, we're not up to our 130 bookings yet, but we'd like to. The community is scrambling for that. And one of the reasons they like coming to the library is that we are central, we're accessible, we're downtown. downtown, we're on the way from the high school, we're on the way, all those factors come into play. The additional programming space has that dual capacity of opening up into the larger space, so that when we're doing our big events, whether they're concerts or galas or whatever, which we do for increased operating funding, it just makes it that much bigger an event. And I know it doesn't sound like a big space, but right now what Carolyn is using for programming is, we walked it, we measured it out. It's the equivalent to that space. And yes, initially we could have gone a little bit bigger on the plans, but there's a hydro easement there. So without moving the hydro easement, we're looking at maybe an additional 5 feet out. But structurally, you'd want to keep that 26 feet, 26.5 feet, or whatever it is from pillar to pillar. So our needs will change, and it's crystal balling. Libraries are, I was talking to a consultant who does needs assessment and that sort of thing, and they say that library services is one of the fastest changing municipal responsibilities, much more. I mean, you know, a pool is a pool and you do different types of programming in it, but you're not really going to repurpose that pool unless you get rid of it, kind of thing. So a library is it's just changing and evolving all the time. And we are looking at creating other redistribution within the setting, but right now that space will be programming. I don't know, did I answer the question?
What I'm getting from you and what I think you're saying is, with your forecasted redistributions of the different vignettes of the library, that you feel the space is going to be what you need.
I believe the square footage of that library as a full building is considered mid to full size, or at capacity, where we are a larger library for a standalone branch. The trends of the future are pop-up libraries, mobile libraries, that sort of thing, which we've launched with Kirby. And, you know, we're already booked for 5 or 6 events for the summer already. So that trend, it's the trend of mobile, the trend of pop-up, the digitization. So our focus in the last little while is to get back into our programming at full swing.
Okay, thank you. So my opinion then on this, when I read it, yes, it's the pits that it's so much higher that the bid to what we had, but just like our seniors, we have a responsibility also to our youth and everyone uses the library in town, and we've won, you know, our librarians have won so many awards in the last years. They're so innovative with their programming and everything. I have a problem saying no to this. I have a major problem saying no to this. So I don't think I can support your position, albeit very thoughtful and whatnot. But I do believe that our library is one of our greatest assets. And we can't put a dollar value, it's not a roof. We can't put a dollar value on what they provide to the community. So I can't support this. I would hope that my peers around the table would agree and that we can find the dollars. Arnprior is growing very rapidly. Our revenues, everything is so much higher than it has been in the past couple of years. We should be able to fund this.
Dan, just before you start, can you clarify for us, Patrick, this easement issue?
Yes.
Because that sounds pretty restrictive for size.
It is and it isn't. So there's a hydro transformer. You're probably familiar with it,
Yeah.
right at the bridge. And there's another hydro transformer on the Renfrew County apartment building property. They are linked. That can be relocated. There is a cost to it.
Well, that won't be inexpensive.
Well, it won't be inexpensive, but at the same time, even if we're talking $20,000 in a $2 million job on a large expansion, you know, it's not as significant. We are talking about our cost versus benefit is certainly worth it if we get a much larger structure, and we do own the parkland all the way to the river. So we're relocating the easement still within our property.
That was gonna be my next question. We don't have any land restrictions on the relocation.
Not as of yet.
Okay, Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm agreeing with Lynn. Can't support the recommendation. I'm supporting the library. One of the reasons being a county, we've just had an apartment complex for affordable housing that was budgeted for 800,000. And now it's going to be between 1.6 and 2.4 million dollars. That's just in the last year. And they say it could go up. So having said that, if we start budgeting for 4 or 5 years down the line, who knows what's going to be? Today, when we go by the library, I can't tell you the number of mums and tots I see walking into that. And that's our future for Arnprior. If we're going to look after the kids and the mums, then the library will be used more and more. And that's a good feeling to me. Again, excellent report, very detailed. I could understand it for a change on the engineering side of the house, but unfortunately, I'm against it. Thank you.
Okay, Tom?
I support the report, and I know the library is a very valuable asset to the town of Arnprior. But that amount of money for to build that small an area, I agree that, you know, let's wait, look, and build something that we can, that's going to be of the size that we may need down the road, not tomorrow, but 5 or 10 years from now. So I'm very much in support of the report.
Okay, Lisa?
Thank you so much. I know it's taken a lot of time and energy from everybody. The size needs have been discussed by the by the library board. I think that's important for everybody to recognize that as much as it would be great to have bigger space, this is the space that is needed and can accommodate our residents today and into the future, given the changes that we're seeing. I don't want to duplicate a lot of what's been said and take time. One thing I wanted to mention is you mentioned that the insurance on the building was 2.9 million, and I'm now worried that we may be underinsured given the construction and all the things. This project does allow the library to address needs for present and foreseeable future. And as Karen mentioned, strategic planning focus did identify programming space as a key priority. The board has already spent nearly $60,000 as well from reserves, dedicated donations, and fundraising efforts. And there's a sizable trust that's earmarked for it that we potentially could also lose. This project and this 403 square feet was supported, you know, in the application, which received the favorable. And the geotech is not going to change, even if we were to go out, even if we were to expand a little bit bigger. The reason that there's no basement is because of the needs of the geotech study. So that's not going to change either. And that is a big part of why it's expensive. That's not going to change. The Arnprior Public Library provides one of the highest per capita program attendance for all ages for a similar sized Ontario library. I think that's important to recognize. I think many around the table do recognize it. As our population grows, programming space needs also to grow. Don't want to repeat that, my apologies. It provides the dual purpose of expanding the main library space for special events, launches, galas, outdoor programming space, 24/7 Wi-Fi. We'll mention that. This council has pushed for growth, and we do need to support what we have coming at us. The library and its needed expansion are a very important part of the landscape for future Arnprior and part of the amenities that we need to address as we are growing. I believe we do need to make a decision on this tonight and get the shovels in the ground soon, because as you mentioned, the application was contingent on a finishing date, and we don't want to hinder that by starting any later than what we need to. So on that, what I would ask of our treasurer is, given that there is a shortfall, what options does council have available to us if we were to proceed and go forward?
So later on, excuse me, as Councilor Mickey mentioned, there is a surplus deficit bylaw that is on tonight, which accounts for 2021 surpluses. So in that bylaw, what it does is it allocates, as per council's reserve and reserve fund policy, In your policy, it states at the end of the year, whereas treasurer, I have to put those reserves. So, let's take water and wastewater. If your water has a surplus, it has to go into the water reserve. If your building services funds has to go into building services, and that's outlined in the reserve fund policy. What it has too is with the general surplus is at budget time from council is that you want to top up those surpluses that have the minimum balances. So right now, the way the surplus deficit, it takes those general reserves or surpluses, from 2021, and it allocates it as per the reserve fund policy, and then it goes into the reserve funds that are not making their minimum balances right now. So the approximate equivalent of the general surplus, not counting all of your ones that from water, wastewater, are around 452,000. So I would recommend to council, if you're going to fund this project, is I wouldn't touch those surpluses. They need to go into those reserves. To me, council, your option would be the capital expenditure reserve fund, as if you were funding this project just as the capital expenditure reserve fund. At the end of the day, your reserves will, your ending balance will kind of be neutral. The difference is that if you don't fund the project, you do have that additional $450,000 for future projects. I know there's a lot of other projects kind of thought about, like the waterfront, things like that, coming down and looking at condensed periods where, some of those fundings. And at budget time, council gets to see everything, all the different projects together. It's really difficult on these single ones where you're just looking, do we have funding to fund one single project? Of course we do, but it's when you look at, the plan to fund the long range. I know Serena here was talking about, making sure we have those funds for the long range. So that's where I would, if council chooses to proceed, that's what I would recommend. Everything, but just wanted to give the full context of the picture reserves.
The capital expenditure reserve is just over 3 million right now, and I appreciate the policy, how we have to deal with the surplus. And, that was, my discussions with Robin today, we got to where that would be the focus of the source of funding. You have something else?
No.
Oh, I thought you
No,
were waving your hand there.
Not in yet.
I'm tore with this square footage in that, because it's a little bit of my background, but a bigger facility, the geotech's going to be a bigger bill. And I'm not so sure that satelliting out of that service as this town grows isn't going to be, a consideration for, rather than having it in one end of town. But so, I'm leaning towards the project, but I am concerned about the issues you raised. Sorry, Ted was next, and then Patrick.
Victor?
Ted.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not going to repeat everything that's said. They're good points, valid points, and I agree with them. In my previous job, if I had to write that report, it wouldn't be any different than what you guys wrote. Well done. However, I'm wearing a different hat now, and I look at the level, look at the services that the community provides to the public. And library seems to come to the top of the list because it's used through all age groups and will continue to move in that direction. I was here when the original library was built. I know the difficulties in driving the files. I know that it's extremely expensive. However, that's the only way to go in our situation is in the easterly direction, and that happens to be the conditions where it used to be the river bottom a number of years ago. So it's a small addition. However, I think based on talking to library staff, it will be well used, and reorganization, as discussed, changes everything. But I got the feeling, a comfortable feeling, that they're not going to be back next year looking for money for another type of renovation or additions. That's somewhere down the road. And our new development charges bylaw is underway now, which will probably take something like that under consideration. So having said that, I think it's important to this community. It's expensive, but everything is, and I can't see it getting any cheaper. No matter what, how long you put it off, you get another grant, the same amount, we're in the same boat. So let's move. I'm in favor of moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. Okay, Dan, and then I'll go down the road, then Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Just to touch on what you mentioned before, when this building or the addition is built, that's the entrance place to the waterfront. I mean, what better place can you see brand new spanking as you walk down the waterway, and then we're gonna be working on the waterfront down the line. But this is to me, a focal point in town that's new, exciting, and when you're trying to go down to the water, you got something to see as you go by. And the people in the vestibule, they're looking out as you go by, and Wi-Fi is paramount to me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, Lynn?
So I was just gonna say, we have to focus on the fact that it is 450 square feet or whatever the square footage is. It's a small footprint, right? But that footprint is going to allow them to have access to the outside right then and there. And the square footage of the outside patio needs to be taken into consideration. To do that outside patio without access is useless. It's not going to have the same effect. So really, I see that as extra value square footage as well, the outside. And I was going to mention how it is the opening of the river walk there too. So it's definitely a win for the town for that to be developed on many different fronts.
Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess speaking last, I am in favor of the report as well. And it was, I mean, it's a troubling decision to make, but my reasoning, well, it's just a practical thing to do, to be honest. It's a lot of money, and I do believe that with the talented people that run the library, the talented people that we have on staff, you know, putting together a committee to come up and find alternative ways to maybe create a similar space. I think it is doable. You know, we have a museum right next door, and I'm not going to say that it's underutilized, but it's not utilized as much as the library. And so I think there's potential victories that we can like use there. So I think that's a practical alternative. You know, being in the business, I do love outdoor spaces, and Lynn brought up a good point. Like, you have to include the outdoor space as part of this. And I mean, that can still be done. The outside space can still be done without adding the extra 450 square feet space. So the library does wonderful things. I'm not going to, it's fantastic, but to me, it's just, it's not a practical use of money at this time. And I know later on, we have a bylaw coming up, and the surplus, it kind of seems like all the stars are aligned, because the surplus is pretty much what the shortfall is. But you know what? We have a surplus because of the good work that we've done, and you know, we don't have to spend that money. That money isn't just to go and say, well, we have this extra money, we can spend it. I mean, that's not the way it should be spent. I think it's a lot of money for what we're getting. I think that, as I said, we can come together and come up with alternative solutions to still give a wonderful additional space to the residents of Arnprior. So I'm in favor of your presentation.
Lisa, yeah.
I don't think it's been highlighted enough. I do think we need to be very mindful that part of the reason we're only short of $430,000, and choose my words carefully, is because we did receive a sizable grant that we don't know is whether that will ever be available to us again as we move forward. So I would like to put a motion on the table, if I may, Mr. Mayor, that we proceed with the addition as soon as we can, so that we don't lose the opportunities for the grant and we get it done, and that we fund it through capital reserves that's suggested by our treasurer. I don't have a seconder yet, but I will.
I'll ask for a seconder in a minute. As soon as there's two thoughts going through my mind, and I think, you know, just to put things in perspective, a library for 25,000 people, you know, maybe a reality someday for Arnprior. We just got our census at 9,629, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I always say to people, you know, we're growing rapidly, right? And we're in a surplus largely because of the building that's going on, if you want to know the reality of it, the permits that are coming in and all that sort of stuff. You take the fairgrounds with 200 doors, if you check, and I did, and I think the number was 1.12 children per family now in Canada, right? So 200 doors, you're not even going to have 600 people up there. So you've got 500 doors across the bridge there at the subdivision, including the apartments. You're going to have maybe 1,200 people there. So when you look at the houses, we're a long way from jumping by 5,000 and 10,000 people, in the next, I would think, 10, 15 years or more. I would be surprised if we bring the number at 15,000 people. So that scope and size, I'm just saying, isn't an immediate concern to me. I think that's a population base that there'll have to be some really hard discussion and decisions made about Arnprior and boundaries and things like that before we ever get into that scenario. And I really think, from being fair to the population, the way the town is spreading, we know across the 417, there'll be housing built out there again. And there has that. I like the idea of satelliting out of that main library rather than trying to think we're going to deal with our final population in the one spot. I agree from a business perspective, Patrick couldn't have done a better job in the report. All those facts were necessary to hear and needed to be out there. But I think that the library certainly is a superior program, but we're fortunate in our staff and our programs across the whole gamut. Arnprior is a pretty fortunate community from what we have to offer. And, we happen to be in a growth period where we happen to have this surplus. And, in the last couple of years, we've had COVID funding come in that helped pay some bills for us, that kind of helped put us there. I've said before, and it's still cautious to me, that our revenue is going to continue to grow for the next 2 or 3 years, maybe 4. But then we need to be ready when it starts to level off and go down, because all of those linear assets are going to start to need attention, and it's going to need money there. I certainly had hoped that some of that surplus might have been discussed for the waterfront, but I think there's still time for that. I really think that the comparison of costs today versus maybe a year or 2 years from now, or 3 years on a bigger building and have to drive those piles of increased costs, I think we'll be in a similar dilemma looking at it. And I appreciate the cost per square foot issue, but I certainly support the expansion at this time. Thanks, Patrick. So I'll ask for a seconder. Excuse me, did you include
Sorry, we dispense with the motion on the floor first?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
the original motion,
I think
yeah.
that's the easiest thing to do.
Okay, so you want to read it, please?
Sure. The council not proceed with the current tender award for an extension to the Arnprior Public Library building, and the council directs staff to form a joint committee between library and town staff to consider alternative options to obtain additional usable space for the Arnprior Public Library, including consideration of an increased Arnprior Public Library building expansion footprint to meet future growth requirements.
Okay, moving a seconder for that. Chris is moving it, seconder for it.
We have Chris and Dan. Yeah.
Sorry, oh, Dan did?
Yeah.
Oh, I
That's the original report.
I saw it. Oh, okay, okay. So then we've had all kinds of comments. Does anybody want to make a last comment? Okay, then all in favor, please. So 2, so that motion's defeated. Okay, so Lisa has a motion. I was just going to ask, did you include the funding source in that?
As recommended by Jennifer through capital reserves.
Capital
Would you like
reserve,
me to read?
just to complete the motion, I guess.
The council award PW 2022-06, extension to the Arnprior Public Library project to Reckon Crew in the amount of $1,178,364, including HST, with the shortfall of $430,122.80 being funded from the capital expenditure reserve.
So I need a seconder for that motion. Lynn, any further comments? Chris, yeah?
Yeah, now that we're going ahead with this, it looks like, what happens now if it doesn't happen? I mean, I don't know who Renault Crew are, and I don't know any of these companies. What happens if they say, yes, we'll go ahead and do it, and they they don't meet the timelines? What happens to the funding that?
So if we're not complete by March 31st, 2023, whatever funding has not been dispensed, theoretically we become ineligible for. So they could revoke funding. They may work with us. That would be at the discretion of the federal government. We do have a penalty clause of $1,000 a day. But as I said, I believe timeline is a major factor here. And it's likely that these bidders have bid in the penalty clause, a bid considering the penalty clause, assuming they're going to be late on delivery. So there is that to consider, absolutely.
And I think you're right, Patrick, that becomes a discussion with the federal government then too. The supply chain will be a factor in that, you know, labor is a factor in that today in doing any kind of project. So it's not like the money's gone or the balance of money is gone. It's a point where talks start and, but there's a potential risk, Chris, there's no, Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to confirm that we're going to do this. If there's other fundings that become available, i.e. Mr. Yakubowski, Galant comes back and says, here's a couple extra $1,000, that will be taken off the money we're taking out of the capital reserves.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Lisa,
I
sorry.
just want to request the recorded vote on this, please.
Sure. So she's asked for a recorded vote.
Councillor McGee,
Yes,
Councillor Toner,
No,
Councillor Burnett,
No,
Councillor Gritstead,
Yes.
Councillor Stripe,
Yes,
County Councillor Lynch,
Yes,
and Mayor Staff.
Yes. That's it. Thank you very much. Thanks, Patrick and John. Good job.
Thank you.
So our next one is the purchase of town lands.
The council authorized a bylaw adopting a disconnecting from work policy, sorry. Jumped ahead. The council received report number 2205-24-02, sale and declaration of surplus municipal lands, Norma Street South, and the council declare lands identified as part 1 and the remainder of part 2 on registered plan 49R-12945 as surplus lands to the town of Arnprior. And the council in sole discretion identify the following methods for the disposal of surplus lands. Disposal of non-viable land by direct sale / negotiation with a set value of $1 per square foot. And the council direct staff to provide notice of council's intention of the sale and disposal of lands in accordance with section 6.6 of policy ASCP 14, sale and disposition of land.
I didn't jump ahead.
No, she did. She started reading the next.
I
Oh,
started
one.
okay, because I'm looking at the
Yes.
agenda.
Oh, that was me.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. Okay, mover and a seconder, please. Dan and then Robin, you're
Yeah.
taking it?
I'm going to speak to it. You had to have one earlier this afternoon, so I said I'd touch on it. Council is familiar with this piece of land. We had a discussion about it at the last meeting. Formalize the declaring of these lands as surplus. So the lands we're talking about for the public are a strip of former CN rail line that became part of the town's trail system several years ago, back in the early 2000s. The town has maintained these lands as a trail. They run from Norma Street to Charlotte, just west of William Street. At this point, they're not heavily used from a trail perspective, and there are sidewalks that could realign the trail system to continue on to the CN rail outside of Arnprior. The town has received a request for declaring the land surplus and potential purchase from a landowner abutting the lands. First step in that process is for council to declare that the lands are surplus to our needs. That doesn't commit council to selling any lands, but does formally notice that these are surplus lands or considered surplus. Next step would be for council, as for the recommendation to declare the lands as non-viable, meaning it really can only be used in association with another abutting property, and to establish the sale price. We've established the traditional CN land sales of $1 square foot for these lands as well, for council's consideration as a direct sale to the neighboring property. And then should council approve that recommendation, the next step is to direct staff to provide notice of council's intention to sell and dispose of the land in accordance with the policy. So we would undertake that and come back with a bylaw for council's consideration.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Comments, Ted? Yes.
Just a question, not sure how to deal with it, other than the fact that this dollar a square foot, the price from 30 years ago. Should we not be increasing that by inflation?
Take direction from council. If council wishes, we can evaluate what the inflation value would be in today's dollars for a sale of surplus CLNs. Happy to provide that information to council prior to allow it for sale.
My response to that is, this chunk of land, like a number of others we've done this with, like one up beside Canadian Terror dead. It's certainly not trail use with the CPR line now, the trail all the way across town. And I've been saying to Robin for years, add it to the roll, add it to the roll. The dollar a square foot, because there's only one person generally who will buy it. You give it to them, it gets added to their chunk of property and gets reassessed, and there's tax value to it down the road. And I think there's more value than that. A lot of these are in older sections of town, and there's people who have been living there for years and now are willing to, or for some reason or another, want to take on that property. I think it's more important to get it on a tax roll and get it cleaned up and let it add to the presentation of the town. And I understand that it's been there for years, but the real advantage is to get it onto a tax roll and get it cleaned up, I think. And then when do you draw the line in the dollar? Like at some point you got to date to that. And then,
My comment was that we just sold another piece last year, I think it was, or the year before at $1. So it wouldn't be fair to this person to jack it up when Ted Brown and whatnot bought theirs not so long ago at $1 a square.
I mean, that's what I meant by a timeline.
Yeah.
There need to be a
I'm not
time.
suggesting this one because
No,
we're
I-
in motion with it, but moving forward, whatever comes available, even 10 years from now, we're going to charge $1 a square foot.
Well, staff can look at that and bring back some information for us, but, I'm just saying, I think it's more important to get it on a tax roll and get it cleaned up. The one thing I'd ask staff to do is put it on the planning to-do list, and I know, is to look at the balance of that trail across town. Because like, in my mind, the piece at the Legion is really grubby and dangerous, and maybe somebody in that neighborhood who might want it, and, it's, there's only a few chunks of it left going across town, so we might as well address it. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment on Robin said with the trail itself is not much used with the new William Street, and we have a new sidewalk down that entire length. So people are using the sidewalk more than that trail. And when it's blocked off, they just keep on going down to Division and make a left turn. So with our new sidewalk in place, it's replaced that with a lot better accessibility and bicycles and whatnot. Thank you.
All right. So then all in favor? Carried, thank you. So disconnect from work policy.
The council authorize a bylaw adopting a disconnecting from work policy, HRES 08, and that the policy be issued to all staff in accordance with requirements under the Employment Standards Act 2000, and that council authorize a bylaw amending the hours of work policy, HRES 06, to include an updated Appendix A full-time administration positions chart.
Move it seconded, please. Lisa. Dan. Comments? Who's going to lead this? Oh, yeah. Mine was on this policy, to be honest with you. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Sackhill, just a presentation up there for me. So tonight I'm going to talk about the disconnecting from work policy. Let's go through a little bit of background first for what the legislation has. So right now, employers that employ 25 or more employees are required to have an actual written policy in place on the topic of disconnecting from work by June 1st, 2022. So these requirements were added to the Employment Standards Act on December 2nd, 2021. So they really left a kind of a little short window there in order for employers to put this policy in place. I wanted to just touch base with the ESA, however, does not require an employer to create a new right for employees to disconnect from work to be free from that obligation to engage in work-related communications policy. So it's not a new right for employees. Employees really already have that right to disconnect under the ESA through other things, for example, eating periods, take breaks, vacation with pay, public holidays, etc. So what the ESA does require of this policy is that the policy, you have to apply it to all of your employers and employees that work in Ontario. The policy has to include the date it was prepared and any date any changes were made. And the employer must also provide a copy of this written policy to its employees within 30 calendar days of the policy being prepared or the policy being changed, or 30 days for a new employee being hired. So under the ESA, other than those requirements, the ESA doesn't actually specify any other information that the employer must include in the policy in order to specify the length. So really it allows the employer has to determine the content of the policy. It has to though outline the expectations of disconnecting from work for those staff. So if we talk about what is disconnecting from work, so the term disconnecting from work in the ESA is defined to mean not engaging in work-related communications, including emails, telephone calls, video calls, sending or reviewing messages, and basically to be free from the performance of work. So for the town of Arnprior, the town is committed to increasing overall employee health and wellness and providing employees with that positive work-life balance. So really this disconnecting work policy, it's intended to promote those ideals, specifically by detailing what is the town's expectations related to disconnecting from work for their employees. So within the policy, the different sections of the policy, what it really does is it to facilitate that disconnecting from work. It encourages employees to how to manage workloads, how to manage productivity, how to communicate clear boundaries between work and personal lives. And it really encourages employees, take your scheduled breaks, take your vacation, take your accrued time off for rest, relaxation, and personal pursuits. So in the policy, when we talk about workloads and productivities, we within the policy, we outline strategies for employees on, if anyone's struggling to manage their workloads, what are some strategies and things they could put in place, including that we'll have managers support them to help evaluate their priorities and due dates. The policy also provides some time management tactics to really help employees maximize the productivity during the work days, because we all know sometimes working additional hours doesn't always mean you're being higher productivity. For communications, so in the policy, we do speak to communications. We outline different communication expectations for the various categories of staff. We do outline strategies for helping them manage communication boundaries, for example, expectations for email response times, how to set your online status to away or out of office, and how to use scheduling tools. Scheduling tools, you can set a timer for an email to be sent the next day and things like that. I wanted to clarify that the policy doesn't change any already established regulations for communications outside regular working hours. So for example, your standbys, your call out, your road patrols, fire calls, and anyone who's on that emergency control group for emergencies. It doesn't impact any of that. Those communications are already set in place. The policy also touches on breaks and time off, as I mentioned. So the policy encourages employees to take their scheduled breaks, take your accrued vacation time to rest and enjoy your personal pursuits. And while you're on vacation, employees aren't obligated to complete those work-related activities during that scheduled time off. Knowing that, however, time management is the responsibility of employees, and scheduling time off has to not interfere with any sort of deadlines. In the policy, we include that managers will be working with their employees to help delegate any job-related duties that could be completed while employees on vacation to help maintain and keep workflows and productivity going. When we touch on overtime, we already do have a policy in place that deals with overtime, and that's the hours of work policy. So the town recognizes under that policy that obviously in order to meet operational requirements for the town, employees will from time to time be required to work beyond their normal hours of work. The hours of work policy that's already in place, it outlines the fair and appropriate compensation for all employees while being mindful of the town's accountability to the general public to ensure that we're providing those quality services in an effective and efficient manner. Financial considerations for this policy, there's no real direct financial implication for implementing the disconnecting from work policy. Really, the policy is intended to complement the policy procedures that we already have in place for being a workplace of choice and helping create that positive work-life balance for employees. So next steps, options, council could choose to amend the draft disconnecting from work policy to include any additional expectations or clarifications as it pertains to disconnecting from work from useful employees. Next steps, I do have a bylaw on tonight's agenda to adopt the disconnecting from work policy. And then after it is adopted, the intent is to roll the policy out to all staff and facilitate with staff any discussions that they would have on the policy.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Comments, questions? to me, it's an advice policy. That's really what I see it, and I guess you can monitor it somehow, by each department manager. You have particular individuals that you have issues with, but I see it as good sound advice to employees, but I don't know how much more of that can do.
Yeah, no, my only thought is for the managers. I guess it would be important that they're all on the same page. I'm just thinking like, if Jennifer and Graham give their employees the time off that they ask for, and they don't say, you don't have to get that done, but John says, what, no, you need this done tomorrow at 6 o'clock. I mean, so one manager isn't following, and so what's the course of action for the employees to follow? Not that that's going to happen, but it just, if all the managers are on the same wavelength,
Yes.
does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I think some of the steps that the town staff do to make sure that all the managers are on the same wavelengths is actually every 2 weeks we have a senior management team meeting.
Okay.
And we talk about all those kinds of things to make sure that we're being consistent and we're, rolling things out consistently to all the different staff. There will be, of course, some nuances, like small nuances between departments, but we also have an HR officer, and if any employee also has any sort of concerns or anything, they're always can come talk to the HR officer, and she can always help facilitate any discussions for an employee with a manager or anything like that as well. So we have all of those supports in place for staff.
Sorry, John. Okay.
He smiled.
Yeah.
Okay, then, so all in favor? Carried, thank you. So we have our first proclamation tonight.
That council proclaimed June 2022 as Seniors Month in the town of Arnprior.
Move in seconder, please. Lynn and Chris, read the proclamation.
Whereas Seniors Month is an annual nationwide celebration, and whereas seniors have contributed and continue to contribute to the life and vibrancy of this community, and whereas seniors continue to serve as leaders, mentors, volunteers, and important and active members of this community, and whereas June is Seniors Month in Ontario, and it is a time when we recognize our amazing older adults and the many contributions they have made in our communities, and whereas the 2022 theme for Seniors Month in Ontario is Stay Active, Connected and Safe, and whereas the Greater Arnprior Seniors Council will be working with the Seniors Active Living Center to provide increased programming for seniors in our community throughout the month of June, therefore be it resolved that the town of Arnprior hereby proclaims the month of June 2022 as Seniors Month in the town of Arnprior, and encourages all citizens to recognize and celebrate the accomplishments of our seniors.
Any comments? All in favor? Carried, thank you. And the second one, please.
We have a dual month. The council proclaimed June 2022 as Recreation and Parks Month in the town of Arnprior.
Move in seconder, please. Tom and Ted.
Whereas in the town of Arnprior, we are fortunate to have a variety of recreation and park systems, providing countless recreational opportunities for residents and visitors from around the world. And whereas recreation enhances quality of life, balanced living, and lifelong learning, it helps people live happier and longer, develops skills and positive self-image in children and youth, and develops creativity and builds healthy bodies and positive lifestyles. And whereas recreational participation builds family unity and social capital, strengthens volunteer and community development, enhances social interaction, creates community pride and vitality, and promotes sensitivity and understanding to cultural diversity. And whereas parks, open space, and trails provide active and passive outdoor recreational opportunities, help maintain clean air and water, and promote stewardship of the natural environment. And whereas recreation, therapeutic recreation, and leisure education are essential to the rehabilitation of individuals who have become ill or disabled or disadvantaged, or who have demonstrated antisocial behavior. And whereas the benefits provided by recreation programs, services, and parks and open space reduce healthcare and social services costs, serve to boost the economy, economic renewal and sustainability, enhance property values, attract new business, increase tourism, and curb employee absenteeism. And whereas the town of Arnprior is participating in the Participation Community Better Challenge, a national physical activity initiative that encourages Canadians to get active in search of Canada's most active community. And whereas organizations, schools, sports groups, recreation centers, and workplaces can participate in the challenge by tracking the group activities they organized on the Community Better Challenge website from June 1st to 30th. And whereas the Town of Arnprior's Recreation Department has also created a campaign called Recreation Passport, available at the Nick Smith Center, that includes 12 barrier-free activities that the community can engage in to stay active. Therefore, be it resolved that the Town of Arnprior hereby proclaims the month of June 2022 as Recreation and Parks Month in the Town of Arnprior, and encourages all citizens to recognize the benefits and values of recreation parks in Arnprior and participate in the many activities taking place this month and throughout the year.
Any comments? All in favor then? Carried, thank you. And our last proclamation, please.
The council proclaimed June 20th to 26th, 2022 as Pride Week in the Town of Arnprior.
Mover and seconder, please. Lynn and Lisa.
Whereas the Town of Arnprior strives to be a safe, welcoming, and inclusive community for all, and whereas the Pride Rainbow flag is an important symbol of hope and acceptance for 2S LGBTQ+ youth and adults who continue to face stigma, discrimination, isolation, and bullying in their home, workplaces, and community spaces simply for being who they are, and whereas this puts 2S LGBTQ+ individuals at elevated risk of mental health issues, substance abuse, homelessness, and suicide. And whereas the Pride flag sends a message that Renfrew County and the Town of Arnprior is a safe and welcoming place for all. And whereas flying the rainbow flag at Town Hall during Pride Week symbolizes the town's celebration of diversity and support for the 2S LGBTQ+ community. Therefore, be it resolved that the Town of Arnprior proclaims the week of June 20th, 2026 Pride Week in the Town of Arnprior, and encourage all citizens to take note of this special week and consider what steps we can take to make our community a safe and inclusive place for all, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression.
Okay, comments? All in favor, please. Thank you, Carrie. So we have Operations Committee.
We actually have an amended, a new report on the canteen report.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That council authorized the mayor and clerk to execute the lease agreement with Michelle Brennan, Alicia Ott, and Matthew Ott on behalf of the Town of Arnprior for the Robert Simpson Park Canteen with the terms as outlined within this report.
Mover and seconder, please. Dan and Lynn, who's great.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So just to kind of give you a bit of background, in May of 2016 was when staff last issued a request for proposal for the lease of the operations at the canteen at Robert Simpson Park. Through that process, Karen and Terry Mulvihill were the successful operators of the canteen through that RFP process. And that agreement was for a 3-year term with 2 additional 1-year renewable options. Those renewable options were exercised for both 2019 and then again in 2020. And we reviewed kind of the terms of that lease in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the restricted amount of public events that we would typically host at Robert Simpson Park that obviously would be a detriment to their operations in terms of their financial viability. In 2021, again, with kind of the uncertainty continuing in terms of our operations and as well as the canteen operations, we did elect to again renew the lease agreement for Karen and Terry Mulvihill following their expression of interest to open the canteen again for that summer of 2021. And at that time, we had also had the discussion to say, look, when we would reach this post-pandemic time, we would kind of go back out to that RFP process to determine if there was any other public interest in operating this canteen at Robert Simpson Park. So we did complete that process. There were 3 criteria that was part of the RFP that closed at 11 a.m. last Friday, the 20th of May. So those included experience in similar operation, proposed lease payments over the course of the agreed term, and added value services. And the term that was included as part of this RFP was for a 2-year period encompassing June 1st of this year through May 31st of 2023 and June 1st of 2023 through May 31st of 2024. So 2 RFPs were successfully submitted. Again, Karen Mulvihill, our past operator, did submit an RFP, and it met the criteria in terms of experience in a similar operation, which obviously is quite obvious from the operation of that canteen, as well as career experience for Karen, and highlighted some added values that included beach toys and pets. The second RFP submission was through Michelle Brennan, Alicia Ott, and Matthew Ott for their proposed operation of a canteen for a business called Beach Bites. Collectively, they all have experience in similar operations, and their added value was locally sourced ingredients on their menu from a list of local farmers, selling beach life items such as beach toys, sunblock, insect repellent, lip balm, frisbees, beach balls, kites, and so on. The annual lease payment from Karen Mulvihill came in at $1,500 each year for those 2 years, so a total of $3,000. The annual lease payment proposed from Michelle Brennan, Alicia Ott, and Matthew Ott came at $3,600 annually, so a total of $7,200 over that 2-year period. So after reviewing both submissions, it is recommended that the lease be awarded to Michelle Brennan, Alicia Ott, and Matthew Ott. These 3 individuals have substantial experience in the food service industry, with Michelle Brennan operating MJ Butcher Shop here in Arnprior, while Alicia and Matthew Ott operate both Be Savvy Fine Foods and Cara and Mel's Candy Shop, which recently opened. And of course, they also operate Steelhead and Strikes, the bowling lanes, and eventually the axe throwing that will go in it. So their lease payment offer is the higher of the 2 proposals, and furthermore, their added value provides great options for visitors to the park, as well as the residents that will enjoy the space. And I think a very worthwhile notion to support that support local mentality in terms of their own business operations, but as well as their partners that they have in their operations, which is often sourcing those local ingredients and local goods. In the report, I did also outline their suggested menu that they have that would also be on rotation, and again, focus on encouraging people to, as they say in their RFP, kind of taste of Arnprior, which is what they're looking to offer through their menu offerings. In terms of financial considerations, entering into the recommended lease agreement for the canteen will provide an increase in revenues for Robert Simpson Park, more than doubling the projected revenues for the canteen lease for 2022. Happy to take any questions about this.
Lisa.
I just want to say how excited I am by this. And as after all, we've got more than 3 months since the odds have opened up business, so I was wondering when their next one was going to come along. Congratulations to them and exciting things to come.
Anyone else? I think it's great, the idea of it. There's no risk. Like, I'm thinking it's a short season. It's weather controlled. And there's, it's 2 times at least the rent. From your experience, there's no financial risk there. I mean, I know they have other resources, but same, you're not gonna lose money over extended periods of time, right? Yeah.
I wouldn't expect so. I mean, I think it's great that we have all these events coming back. That will certainly be a feather in their cap, and I think their proposed lease more reflects their keen interest in operating this business venture, as opposed to, they're very savvy business people, as we've seen from what they've done here in the community. So certainly not something that I was concerned with. They did request to view the space. So they've seen it, and they're certainly going in with their eyes wide open on it, from my opinion on it. So
Yeah, and it's fine. There's probably not that much of a risk, but from our side of the coin, it's just that much more revenue has to be generated to offset that much more, right?
if I could add, sorry, one more thing, just knowing that the direction that we're considering going in with these new proponents for the canteen down there. I do also just want to make a remark of thanks to Karen and Terry for their operations of the canteen since 2016. They're fantastic people. I think they're great ambassadors for the community, and it's not just running a canteen there. It's kind of being an information source to a lot of the visitors that do come to the community, and I think they did serve us tremendously well. So just a special note of thanks to them.
Yeah, for sure. They did a good job of chatting with them. Yeah. Okay, all in favor? All right, thank you. Now, Madam Clerk, we're at operations.
The council received the Operations Advisory Committee minutes of March 21st, 2022 as information.
Move and seconder, please. Dan and Lynn, any? Dan, you can speak to it.
Thank you, Commissioner. The only highlight to the meeting was that the Operations Committee is no longer the Emergency Management Planning Committee. It's now taken over by the town staff and the mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all in favor then, please? Carried, thank you. There's no notice of motions, county report then?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Operations Committee is recommending to the County Council, which is tomorrow, that the speed limit bylaw be updated to change the posted speed limit along County Road 1, which is Madawaska Boulevard, between Conifer Lane, Renfrew County boundary, and 600 meters north of the Renfrew County boundary to 60 kilometers per hour, and that would be Eddie Lebec Gate. Of note, the Director Perkins advised the committee that the town of Arnprior Director of Operations, John Stuckley, was an integral part of this updated speed limit. Thank you, John. 2, the Economic Development Officer, Alistair Baird, he's a resident of Arnprior and Harrington, is retiring on the 30th of June. There's a new program from the Ontario government called Connecting the East. A draft transportation plan for Eastern Ontario has been released to build a better transportation system in Eastern Ontario. 2 points of interest in this program is A, to establish a task force of local mayors and Indigenous leaders to make recommendations to the ministry on additional actions to improve rail, bus, and local transit services across Ontario. And 2, to support the sustainability of local airports in the region. MTO recently conducted an airport surveys to update data on the role of Ontario's local airports. Arnprior Airport was part of the survey. Arnprior Housing, 2021, we sold 32 for this month, with $515,000 being the average. And 2022, we've sold 28 with a sale price of $639,329, which is an increase of $123,663. Taste of the Valley is back on. 19th of August, Barry's Bay at the Royal Canadian Legion. 26th August, Eganville Royal Canadian Legion Field. 24th September, Renfrew at the Low Square Town Hall. 21st of October, Deep River Town Hall parking lot. On the 2nd of October, Arnprior on John Street. And the 15th of October is in Cobden at the Cobden Fairgrounds. As we know, the White Lake Road official plan amendment for the new subdivision out beside the Antrim truck stop. There was an appeal to the town for that planned amendment by an individual, private resident, and the Ontario Land Tribunal scheduled a case management conference on the 30th of May, and we'll have more news about that. And that concludes the report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Any questions or comments for Dan? Okay, correspondence, first one, please.
That the correspondence package number I-22-May-10 be received as information and filed accordingly.
Move in seconder, please. Lisa, Lynn, comments? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of reminder to residents, the 2nd of June is the provincial election at the, and you get the advanced polls at the church on Baskin. On page 8, if you're thinking of visiting CFB Petawawa, expect delays trying to cross the Petawawa Bridge as it's under construction until November. And as Graham has mentioned, the reminder that the Silver Chain Challenge is on against Lanark. We need the bragging rights. And on page 18, ever wonder where your tax dollar goes? The federal government is forgiving $50 million in unpaid student loans from the Federal Department of Employment. I know I put my kids through school. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? No, all in favor then, please? Carried. Thank you. Second one.
That the correspondence package number A-22-May-06 be received and that the recommendations outlined be brought forward for council's consideration.
Move in seconder, please. Tom, Lisa. Comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. So our bylaws and resolutions, I guess we have 4 of them. Do we want to pull any of them out separately?
There's the fifth one with the canteen, but with the following bylaws being or hereby enacted and passed, bylaw number 7305-22, adopt 2021 consolidated audit financial statements. Bylaw number 7306-22, adopt the 2021 surplus shortfall funds. Bylaw number 7307-22, adopt policy HR-ES-08, disconnecting from work policy. Bylaw number 7308-22, amend policy HRES-06, hours of work policy, appendix A, full-time administration positions, and bylaw number 7309-22, Robert Simpson Park Canteen rental agreement.
Moved and seconded, please. Lynn and Lisa, comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Have announcements then? No? Lynn has an announcement? Yeah.
Well, just thanks to all the people from Ottawa bringing an economic boom to our town due to the power outage. Thanks very much.
Fine, guys. Ted, yes.
Special thanks to the County Trails Committee for allowing stop signs to be erected at the pedestrian crosswalk on Thomas Street. And it has sure done wonders.
Good. Well, we did have an awards gala the other night for the general public's benefit. You know, from the town of Arnprior, we awarded our Volunteer of the Year award to Mr. Arnold McIntyre. And we'll be visiting him in the next day or so at his home to present that. And Maggie Herbert was the special COVID award winner for her volunteerism with the vaccine clinics through the 2 years of COVID. The chamber ones with a new business award went to Valley Girls Plus. Skilled Trades Award went to Sailor Plumbing. Not-for-profit went to the Men's Shed. And Best Storefront went to White Pines Books and Children Boutique. And Business of the Year went to Be Savvy. And the President Award went to Yoke Sign and Trophies. And Karen announced her retirement that evening. So we have media questions.
Don't have any
No.
media online.
And we have a motion to move into closed, please.
The council moved into closed session regarding one matter pursuant to Municipal Act 2001, Section 239(2)B, to discuss a personal matter about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, to speak about the words.
Mover seconder, please. Chris and Dan.